Hi, this is Robert Cahoon, Director of International Campaigns for 40 Days for Life, and today we are talking about free speech. Big Brother rules currently at the moment. Free speech is a big topic for 40 Days for Life, with the challenge of buffer zones around the world, from Australia to Germany to the United Kingdom to Canada. Many governments have brought in a very restrictive legislation preventing the free expression of speech in these countries and preventing us from organising peaceful, prayerful and legal prayer vigils. Of course, the whole world needs a First Amendment to free speech at this time, and in the United Kingdom this has also been a challenge for us. Having said that, we've still seen lives saved from outside abortion centres. Restrictions on free speech do not curtail prayer necessarily, but I want to encourage all our listeners and volunteers to think and pray about how we can respond to when buffer zones are introduced and how we can continue our witness, which is still powerful. God is not restrained by buffer zones, and our prayers still continue to work. Many testimonies say how it is effective to organise a prayer vigil outside of a buffer zone. I want to encourage everybody to continue to keep going should that happen. In the United Kingdom here, we've had buffer zones in Ealing, in Twickenham and now in Manchester as well, potentially nationwide. So this is certainly a challenge for us. So we should not be prevented from expressing ourselves just because somebody does not like our views or opinions. And in society, yes, there might be some restrictions on free speech in some capacity. That's even the case in America. But prayer is not curtailed by buffer zones. That in the end, our love for God transcends everything, and our love for God can still be manifest with prayers outside of buffer zones too. G.K. Chesterton says, exactly at the moment where hope ceases to be reasonable, it begins to be useful. So in a British abortion centre, there was a woman who was tearfully begging for the abortionist to show her the picture of her ultrasound baby, and the abortionist refused, saying that the ultrasound pictures were just for making measurements. Just outside that abortion centre there was a buffer zone in place. Not only was the free speech restricted outside the abortion centre, also inside the abortion centre that young mother was not being allowed to have freedom of expression. That the abortionist was preventing the freedom of communication from not showing her those ultrasound pictures. We know that a high proportion of women will choose life if they see ultrasound pictures of their baby. The whole world needs a First Amendment for free speech, and when Big Brother is watching you, Orwellian censorship, this is a challenge for our ministry, but God, we can overcome everything. So around the world, many countries have had severe restrictions of freedom of speech, whether that be from British universities, where pro-life organisations and groups have been unable to organise talks or set up their own organisations. In Australia, almost every state now has introduced a buffer zone. In New Zealand, a very strong attempt was attempted recently to introduce a buffer zone, which failed due to a clerical error. We now have them also in Pforzheim and Frankfurt in Germany, as well as Canada. So many countries around the world, particularly Western nations, have curtailed pro-life free speech, which is a challenge for our ministry, but it also demonstrates that we are being effective in these places, that our opponents have attempted to bring in laws curtailing free speech. So prayer is not restricted by a lack of free speech. The love that we have for God can transcend these boundaries, and we've had beautiful stories of lives saved outside of buffer zones in London, 500 metres from the abortion centre twice, as well as regular vigils seeing saved lives on a basis in Perth, Australia. We've also heard stories of saves outside that abortion centre, outside of the buffer zone, from the prayer vigil there. So The love that we have for God, our prayers can transcend any restriction or curtailment of free speech. When there's Orwellian restrictions on our ability to express ourselves, our prayers can still transcend those moments. God's love transcends our human thinking and boundaries. So in this video, I've talked about how restrictions on free speech through draconian legislation have challenged pro-lifers, but this hasn't challenged our ministry. And at some point, this is a spiritual battle, and we will encounter those who are opposed to our views and will attempt to restrict and curtail our freedom of expression. But with God, all things are possible, including the ending of abortion. And wherever you live, get involved in 40 Days for Life. And regardless of the challenges you face, God can overcome all things as we see the beginning of the end of abortion. Thank you for watching today.